Thanks for joining us for Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration. I'm your host, Alexis Avila, educator, online entrepreneur, and founder of tutoring and test prep firm Prepped and Polished, broadcasting today from beautiful South Natick, Massachusetts. Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration is your destination for groundbreaking insight from today's most influential educators, leaders, and minds on the planet. Our show is brought to you by the Mommy to 5K program. My friend Jill of L3 Fitness has a terrific and affordable 12-week course for moms looking to get back into shape. To learn more about Mommy to 5K, please visit www.l3fitness.com/m25k. Get to know the Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on Facebook, search Prepped and Polished, as well as Twitter at Prepped Polished. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Joining our show today is Jamie Cohen. Jamie is a New York City film producer turned teacher, a TED International Teaching Award winner. Jamie is the creator of the Soul Transformational Leadership Seminar, a learning environment that relies on the use of technology, collaboration, and encouragement as the basis for 21st century learning. Jamie earned his Bachelor's of Arts from the University of Western Ontario, graduated from Teachers College at Brock University. He's an English teacher at Tannenbaum Community Hebrew Academy in Toronto, Canada. Jamie spent over a decade teaching challenging and at-risk students, and his teacher training workshops give high school teachers inspiring and practical tools to make their jobs easier, more fun, and increasingly effective. We're grateful to have Jamie on our show. He's going to share with us the amazing work he does with teens in classrooms all over the world. And to our listeners, you can submit a question at any time to radio@preppedandpolished.com. We always appreciate hearing from you. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Alexis, thank you so much for that intro. I'm honored to be here.
Great. So Jamie, just a quick opener, but when you say you live and work in Toronto, is that right in the city where you live and work, or is this the suburbs outside of Toronto?
It's just outside Toronto in the suburbs, about 30 minutes north, in a up-and-coming area called Maple, Ontario.
Oh, wow. Great. Got to check it out sometime. Tell us a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in Canada?
I grew up in Canada. I grew up in Toronto. And when I graduated from university, I wanted to follow really in the footsteps of one of my heroes, who was the producer of Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels. So I headed off to New York after phoning Lorne Michaels 27 times to try to get an interview, and it began a journey working in film. And then after 9/11, the desire to work in TV and film shifted, because I wanted to make more of an impact than I felt I was doing working in that environment, which was an amazing experience, but I felt I needed more and I had more to contribute. So I took a shift. I came back to Toronto and I went into teaching.
Wow, what a shift. Let's go back just a little bit, and let's go back to, because you work with teens. What were you like as a teen? What was it like growing up as a teen for you?
I was rebellious. I was a class clown. I think I had a little bit of an attitude problem. I think I was bored easily. I was a tactile learner who didn't like sitting still for an entire 50-minute class. And I related very strongly to a minority of the teachers. And the majority of the teachers, I really was, I'm sure, a very difficult student to have in class.
Gotcha. And you already said Lorne Michaels, but who were going to like the teenage years? Who were your influences growing up?
Well, a big influence was the movie Dead Poets Society came out when I was 16 years old with Robin Williams as a really out-of-the-box inspirational teacher at a small private school. And I remember seeing that at 16 and saying, that is the kind of impact that I want to make on young people one day. And I remember that thought was there, and then it left for many years. And then years later, I remember how clear it was to me the impact that a teacher can make on a young life. And when I became a teacher, I went out to photocopy a few papers for about 2 minutes, and my whole grade 10 class, when I came back, were standing on their chairs like Robin Williams students, Professor Keating students were in the film. And it was an extraordinary moment for me of bringing me back to my teenage years of what really inspired me in the first place to become a teacher.
Wow, that's incredible. And personally, I love that movie. So I can understand your passion to want to take on that job. Tell us about your transition to teaching from filmmaking, and how did you use your film and documentary filmmaking background career to enhance your teaching?
Well, in my first year of teaching, I came into an environment where most of the students in a economically underdeveloped area of Toronto were either expelled from other schools, had stolen from other students, or were verbally or physically abusive toward their peers. They were all in my class in my very first year at a school in downtown Toronto. And nothing seemed to be working at first. I tried to teach the curriculum, very standard types of approaches, lecture-driven. And then I said, something has to change here. What can I do to engage these learners? And so what I did was I called upon my background making documentaries, working in TV and film, and I decided that I would experiment. And what I did was I told the students that we were going to take a break from the poetry unit we were doing, and we were going to do a class documentary on a day in their life. And the only criteria was there were a few subject matter within there that were inappropriate. So pretty much anything could go. And within 2 classes, there was 100% engagement. Students who weren't showing up, students who were coming late because they were getting into fights, or some were even dealing drugs, they all showed up on time, and we made a film together called Schooled. And I taught them everything I knew about how to make documentaries. And I called on favors from my friends in film and TV, both from Canada and the States, to either come on calls and instruct them via phone. Skype wasn't available as much at that time. Or some of them literally came, they flew in to be with these kids and to teach them how to use a camera, how to write a script, what shots work best in certain situations. And we ended up making a documentary that was shown in school boards across Ontario, and some of the kids in that class ended up working on future films and projects that I had developed. And so that was the beginning of understanding how my journey in film had synergy with dealing and engaging different kinds of learners.
Wow. That's amazing. I wish I took that class. When you jumped into teaching, did you find that the classroom today has changed from the time you went to school? And if so, how?
When I was in school, if the teacher told you to do something, I didn't question as much as students do today. Today's students have much higher expectations in knowing why they're doing what they're doing. It's a much faster paced world, and the content is no longer king anymore. The skill developments and the learning environment today are paramount, and the content can easily be accessed through a 2-minute search on Google.
Mm-hmm.
A student can find 15 experts that know more cumulatively than their teacher.
Wow.
So it's a very, in my day,
mm-hmm.
the sage on the stage was the principal way of communicating information.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, as a student, the passive receptor of knowledge.
Right.
Today, the most effective learning environments that I've seen in my research and in meeting these teachers through TED and throughout North America is these teachers are the guides on the side, and they help students ask big and meaningful questions and go on their own intellectual journey of discovery and wonder. And so that's a principal change. In the past, it was lecture driven, and I sat there and I took the information, and then I was prepared for the test. But when I left the classroom, I forgot what I had learned. And today, it's more student-driven learning environments in which effective teachers are the ones who get students to ask the big questions.
Wow. Didn't know that. That's amazing. Tell us, Jamie, about the SOUL program, the self-organized learning environment that you created for the TED organization contest, which actually led to a win in that contest.
Yeah, well, last February, I was looking at different types of learning environments that I could create for my students. And I had just finished a unit. I'm an English teacher. I just finished a unit which was very traditional, where I did a lot of lecturing, questioning. And I noticed on the final essay that although many students did well on the curriculum-based essay, there were other students, especially the students with learning challenges, who didn't do well. And so I made it my goal that the next unit, which became the SOUL, I would engage every student. I had this high standard that I wanted 100% engagement in my class. So I came across a TED Talk while I was jogging in a ravine just near my house by an educator named Sugata Mitra. And for your listeners who are interested in really revolutionary, cutting-edge educational tools, I highly recommend you watch the 20-minute talk by Sugata Mitra. And Sugata won the $1 million TED Ed Prize, which is the equivalent of the Nobel Peace Prize for educators on TED. And what his simple and brilliant tool is it's a self-organized learning environment is students a teacher asks a big question such as, how do you know when you've reached enlightenment? Or what is a true teacher? And then they go on a journey through the internet, through their own research, in which they find an answer to those questions, and then they present it to the class either in an audio, visual, or tactile way. And the teacher's role is a facilitator. They don't intervene. They don't tell the students what to think. And they're really there to provide encouragement and guidance throughout this process. And what his findings were when he did this in India at first, in areas where students, some of them had very little educational opportunities, is when he put a computer in, he called it a hole in the wall, in a slum just outside where he lived. He noticed something fascinating happen, that the students were learning on their own. Students as young as 8 years old were teaching themselves coding, and they were communicating on a basic level in other languages, in English, in order to teach themselves certain computer skills. And then what he did was, what I did with this is I applied this to teaching Siddhartha. And I teach at a Jewish school, a Jewish private school. So the students have very little prior knowledge of the cultural elements that exist in India or know the customs in that country. So what I had them do is we did a social online collaborative forum in which the students annotated the text online. And then for the second half of the book, I had the students ask big questions that were initiated by the story. So some of the questions the students came up with were, how do you know when you've reached enlightenment? What is a mentor? What is meditation? And does it have an impact on your mind? And then what they did was they went on this journey where they asked questions. I set up Skype mentorships with people that I knew who were meditation teachers and who were authors in the subject areas that they asked questions on. And then by the end of 2 classes, They came up with their own answers based on the questions that they brought up. And I submitted my findings to TED, who was having an international contest for teachers all over the world, and I won. I won this contest. And some of the findings I came up with were 71% of my students, when I did a survey, said that a self-organized learning environment increases their independence in terms of making up their own minds and increasing their ability to find answers to big questions. 57% of students said it increased cultural awareness. And what fascinated me was I asked them, what level of engagement did they have with this? Did they enjoy this or not? And 90% out of 43 students that I did the SOL with said that it was the most effective way they've ever learned to read or study a text. And only 2 out of 43 said it wasn't. But what I found fascinating with this part of it was those students were gifted learners, and they did very well on the curriculum standards that I had set, but it was so out of their comfort zone that even though they didn't really like it, they did very well and they learned a lot. So I used a self-organized learning environment for my students to learn about another culture, to study a text, and to really have a little more confidence in their own ability to learn what they need to learn and not always rely on a lecture-driven teacher to deliver them the content.
Wow, that's perfect. So it's almost like 100% success rate. Can't complain about that. So what opportunities have opened up for you since winning this TED Award? Because I've been following your work, and you've been pretty much everywhere. You're like doing a lot of speaking engagements. What is that about? Are you just kind of spreading the message?
Yeah, I've been asked to. In the last few months, I was invited to go to New Orleans for TED Education, and I've been to New York, and I spoke recently at an education conference with 500 educators called RAFSAC about my experiences with using a SOL and also other types of new educational technologies. I'm doing a webinar in May, which will go into about an hour in detail of how I use SOLs and social online collaborative forums in the class. So opportunities have directly come up as a result of winning this award. But for me, it's not so much about winning an award, it's nice, but it's more about sharing tools to engage students that have really taken my teaching to the next level and energized every day. Well, as soon as we finish this, I'm going in to teach, and I can't wait to get I can't wait to get into my class. And I think there's been times when I haven't felt that way, when I felt worn down. My wife and I have 2 babies at home, 10 months and 2 years old, and my wife's also a teacher. And it can be exhausting to teach a full slate of classes, to keep the energy up every day, and then come home and mark at night, which is the life of most teachers that I know. And so this has given me a way to share with other teachers how to really reduce their workload, right? Engage the students more than they ever have, feel the same type of creative energy and excitement that they had when they were at Teachers College or were inspired when they first started teaching about the possibilities of reaching students of all different levels. And what I found is that the self-organized learning environment and some of these other tools available to teachers for free and that are easy to use within a few minutes of learning them really change the quality of teachers' professional lives, because I've seen it in mine. And also, it makes the students get up in the morning and say, I can't wait to go to that class. And that's what parents have told me that their kids have said about learning in these types of new ways. So that is what drives me to travel all across North America like I have been, to share what I've learned about what's out there and available for teachers and what they can use immediately to transform the quality of their classrooms.
Wow, that's incredible. Jamie, I saw your YouTube video yesterday of a seminar, probably one of your sole seminars for kids, called What It Means to Be a Hero in the 21st Century. Is this one of your latest kind of seminars that you've been doing lately? Can you tell us more about this?
Well, there's an example of a soul.
Okay.
And if teachers are listening to this now who may be interested in seeing what it looks like, this was just a glimpse, but this was asking the students a big question that we had studied over the previous 2 months. Like you said, what does it mean to be a hero in the 21st century? And we had studied what it means to be a hero in film by analyzing The Wizard of Oz. And we looked at Joseph Campbell's 12 Stages of the Hero's Journey in literature. And so what I did was I called upon different experts who are inspiring in fields outside of teaching, such as Louis Jebb, who is an online newspaper publisher of a prototype good news website called Symbio, Symbio, and Nelson Mandela's photographer, Glenn Griffiths, a cutting-edge, innovative young artist who used Google Glass for the first time, and named Gretchen Andrus, and Bradley Hill, who was a trainer who thought he would die when the doctors told him he had 3 months left to live in his 20s, and he didn't accept that verdict, so he used his mind to overcome the greatest obstacle anyone could ever face, and within a few months, he was back to training, and the disease that inflicted his body seemed to disappear. So I looked at these individuals as heroes in their own field, and I had the students explore articles that Louis Jebb, the publisher of Symbio, had posted on his site.
Oh, great!
So the students looked at these articles, and then they had the chance, which is rare today for a student, to look beyond, under the surface of the article, to speak with the subjects of the article and the publisher of the article.
Wow.
And so that's something that any teacher listening could do. And if you look at the students' responses, and that only shows their responses, it doesn't show them working, there are 20 14-year-olds transfixed, completely engaged in listening to these speakers who are talking to them, talking with them as young adults, not talking at them. And so that's what Skype, which everyone has capability to use for only, I think it's $10 a month. Skype Premium allows you to post or to show multiple conversations, video conversations at once. And it's very simple to set up. You need a microphone and you need a room where you can post on a wall the different people. Perfect. And so what we did was, that is how I used a soul in that case, is asked a big question, teamed with Louis Jebb outside of this, who I met in a mastermind group, which I encourage teachers to do when they say, well, how do you get access to all these interesting speakers? Well, there's no mystery to this. Every teacher knows at least one or two experts outside of their field who would be incredible for the students to engage with. Mm-hmm. I've had students talk with Rwandan genocide survivor Patrick Sherengabo and the COO of Lorne Michaels' film company, Saturday Night Live, who I work with for years. Mm-hmm. So everyone knows these people in their lives who they can engage with, and they become mentors to the students by via Skype or even in person, in which they help them answer big questions that the students are really interested in knowing. That teachers can connect to the curriculum in some way where the students walk out of the class with not just knowledge that they need, but with life skills. So they go home for Friday night dinner to their parents and say, and their parents ask them, what did they do in school? Instead of shrugging and saying nothing, they say, you won't believe who I spoke with today and what I learned about myself.
Wow, that's incredible. And it's evident from the YouTube video how engaged the students are when they're watching the screen of these live speakers all over the world talk to them and answer their questions. To you, what is your definition of a hero in the 21st century?
The definition of a hero, well, I'll quote Jackie Robinson's epitaph on his tombstone, and it says, a person, and who I consider one of the great heroes that transcended his field, which was sports. His epitaph says, a person's worth is in direct proportion to the impact they have on others' lives. A person's worth is in direct proportion to the impact that they have on another person's life. And I think true heroism is the quality of giving of yourself. And I think as a teacher, I see this every day where great teachers, great guides or mentors are those who give not just of their time and not just of their knowledge, but really listen, engage, and do it unconditionally without expectation of any type of acknowledgement or reward. And what I saw with the heroes that I brought to the table I brought to the Skype screen that day was each one of them in their own way was focused on what they could give, not what they could get in their art, in their life, and in their relationships with others.
Wow.
And I think if I look at, I'm doing a TED Talk at the end of the month, and I'm looking at what we have in common with the great leaders of the 20th and 21st century, like Mandela and Gandhi and Mother Teresa, and some great business leaders like Oprah and Sheryl Sandberg. And I'm not comparing them, but each one of them have things about them that exist in all of us, like finding within us the ability to overcome obstacles in our lives, whether it is a disappointment in a job or a broken relationship, or in Mandela's case, surviving 27 years in prison and having the foresight and the vision to know that one day what he had set out to do in his 40s, in his case, or earlier, would one day come true. And so for Mandela, it was a vision. With Larry Page, the head of Google, I found out that he's a brilliant listener. With Richard Branson, it's to be not emotionally swayed by the setbacks that are inevitable in an entrepreneur's life. And in Mother Teresa, it comes back to where I started, and what does it mean to be a hero in the 21st century? Even though she passed, for her it meant complete giving of herself toward something that she felt passionate about, which was helping those who couldn't really give her anything other than maybe a thank you or a smile. So I think as teachers who are listening to this and people interested in education, every day a teacher steps in the class, they can be the definition of a 21st century hero because they have the opportunity to impact one student's life, or they're more than a student, one child's life.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice, for teens listening to this who are struggling to find meaning in this confusing transition from teenage to the world, going into the world of young adulthood? A couple tips or two for that age. I know I needed a lot of advice, so I'm sure it'd be helpful to hear from you.
Well, number one, it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
That all the struggles that you're going through now, whether it's feeling alienated or alone and maybe not having the type of friendships which are so important in your teenage years that you'd like to have, you will find people just like you when you get to university and when you graduate. I know I didn't have a lot of friends when I was a teenager, and I felt alone, and I sometimes didn't have someone to eat lunch with. And as time went on, I found people like that. I found people like me, who were creative, who were out of the box thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have interesting friends all over the world. And if you would have told me at 16 years old that I would have or know people who are so inspiring and that I can call and that I really learn from and I laugh with, I would have thought you were crazy. And so the first thing is, it gets better. You will meet the type of friends you want. And the other thing is, some of the most successful people that I've met in the world felt just like you did at that age. They felt like they weren't understood, or they're misunderstood by some of their teachers, maybe their parents, and that they didn't feel like they had much worth. And I'm telling you that you do have an incredible amount of worth, and you will find your genius. You just have to be a little bit patient, which is so hard when you're 16 or 15 or 18, to know that it will come and that you will find it within yourself. Just give it some time. And I can think of one example where I mentored a student at the school I currently am at, he graduated 2 years ago. In grade 10, he was going through a really tough time at home with his family. His parents had separated and his father had moved, and he acted out in school in negative ways. He swore at teachers. He stole a student's smartphone and sold it. He was on the verge of being expelled. And I remember going into the principal's office and saying, I take responsibility for the student, even though I wasn't teaching him at the time, because I saw something in him that was bigger than what was going on with him. To jump ahead, 3 years later, this student graduated with honors because his situation did improve, and he did see that he was a very talented filmmaker. And now he's one of Toronto's up-and-coming music video directors and commercial directors. And so for the students out there who say you don't feel like you belong and that things are really tough at home or tough at school, look at this student who thought when he was 15 that nothing was going well in his life, both at home and at school. And now, a few years later, only 4 years later, he is completely in a different place. And that what's going on, it will pass, and better things are to come. So hang in there.
That's awesome. Wow. So what's next for you, Jamie? Are you, any speaking engagements coming up, workshops? How do we find you, work with you? Plug yourself a little bit.
I've been asked to do a 1-hour webinar on May 20th for an organization called the Digital J Learning Network. And that will be on the use of how teachers can immediately use a social online collaborative forum, create effective flipped videos, and do a solo in their class, which we've talked about. And that will be, I believe, at 11 a.m. on May 20th. And so it'd be great to engage and help you develop these types of technologies in your classes. And then the other thing I'm doing is the end of this month, April 26th, I have been asked to do a TED Talk in Luxembourg. So that will be how to spot a leader in their handwriting, because I am a handwriting analysis expert. And so I'm combining my knowledge of education and handwriting and 21st century leadership into a talk. So those are two things that are coming up in the next 2 months. And you can always look at my website where I post articles about issues that are of interest to educators at jamiemasoncohen.com.
Yeah, I had a chance to look at that website, and it's really, you get a really good scope of what you're doing. But I learned so much from this interview. Well, thank you, Jamie, today for your time. We're really appreciative of it. Thanks a lot for inspiring us and doing the work you do.
My pleasure. I really appreciate the interview, and keep doing the amazing work you're doing too. I think that these type of forums for educators not only inspire the audience, but inspire educators to continue to impact the lives of their students.
Awesome. Well, this wraps up our show today with Jamie Cohen, film producer, TED speaker, International Teaching Award winner. To learn more about Jamie, work with Jamie, hear Jamie, go to his website, www.jamiemason.cohen.com. I'm going to spell that out. JamieMasonCohen, JamieMasonCohen.com. Thank you for joining us on Prepped and Polished Education and Inspiration.